In this presentation, we will generate a transaction detail report to review the new company setup. In other words, we have set up a new company file. We've entered the beginning balances for that new company file, and now we want to review that process. A great report to do so is the transaction detail report. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info. Here we are in QuickBooks Pro 2019. We're currently in the home page. We have the open items open. You can open the open items by going to the view and open windows list. So what we've done so far is to set up the new company, and we have also set up the beginning balances for the new company. What we want to do now is just check our work. Now, the great report to use to check the work is called the transaction list by date. And that's going to give us all the detail that we have thus far. So let's see how that works and how we can use it. First, I'm gonna open up the two main reports that we would have. So I'm going to open up the balance sheet and the profit and loss, and then we'll take a look at the transaction list by date. So if we go to reports, the two main reports we would consider, we're going to scroll down to the company and financial. We're going to go to the balance sheet. And I'm going to make the balance sheet as of the date that we entered the data. We entered the data as of 12/31/2018, and we're going to start working on the company as of the first day of 2019. So I'm going to say this is as of 12/31/18. So there's our balance sheet. Then I'm going to take a look at the income statement. So for this time period that we entered this information, I'm going to go to reports up top. We're going to go down to company and financial, and the profit and loss, or income statement, profit and loss. And this has a date range. Now, all the data has been entered as of the end of the time period, meaning if I ran a year, 01/01/18 to 12/31/18, January 1st to December 31st, 2018, we should have the same report here as if I reported this whole thing as of 12/31/18 to 12/31/18. It was all entered in as one date, which is kind of what you want. So if you enter 1 day time period and you don't have the same information, check the dates, make the beginning date earlier, and see if it changes the data. And if it is, it's just a date issue. So what we have open now is the profit and loss and the balance sheet in the open windows. So these are the things we can compare so far. So this is what we have done. Now, normally in practice, we would go to the balance sheet and say, do all these balances make sense, right? I have this much cash. I have this much in accounts receivable, inventory, furniture and equipment, and so on. So if we're entering this data, again, if we started a new company and we didn't have any data, then of course this would be a problem. But if we're starting a new company file in QuickBooks and had already been running the business in some fashion before we had entered into QuickBooks, then we would be viewing these beginning balances and checking that the balance sheet looks all correct. And then we would go down here and say, okay, then the kind of plug number, the number that QuickBooks forced, was the equity account here, which should be okay as long as every other account is correct. So if you check this sheet in our practice problem compared to what you have in the system, if you're working along with this problem, I first want to check all the balance sheet numbers and see if they're proper, if they're all the same. So you want to go through here and check these numbers to your numbers, and that would be one check that we would have. Now, of course, if there's something off, if there's something wrong here, then we'd have to go in and see what is wrong. One great way to do that, for example, is if the accounts payable was wrong, we could double click on the accounts payable and see the detail of it. And we could see the detail. In this case, it's the $15,000. Now that's great, except that of course you can't do that on both sides of the system. I can't see your numbers, they couldn't see my numbers. So on our system, we can go in and double click on it and say, okay, what's going on? And if it's a date thing, we can change the dates and see if it's just a date thing that's causing the difference. So that's the first kind of check. I'm going to close this back out. If something's wrong, whether it be a practice problem or in practice. Okay, so then the other thing, other than that, we don't have all the detail that happened as of a certain date in this report. We could do that by going to another report that we will take a look at here. Now the profit and loss, again, going to the profit and loss, you can check this information. Now this information isn't information we're going to report to anybody because it's uncategorized and uncategorized. But when you're just checking your work compared to this work, you can see if this comes out the same. And again, double click, zoom in if there are any problems. Now what is nice to do is to be able to check everything by transaction by when we entered it, because we entered all this stuff as of one day, as of 12/31/2018. So could we get what kind of like a transaction detail of all the transactions in one day instead of getting something similar to a GL report, the transaction detail for one individual account? We can. So that's what we'll do now. We're going to go to the reports up top. We're going to go to the account and taxes, and we're looking for the transaction list by date. So we want the transaction not by account, that's by account. We want the transaction list by date. So don't get those two mixed up because by account won't give us, this is more like a general ledger, and this will give us the account, by when we entered it. So here we have that. And we're going to change the dates, and we should just need one day, which is 12/31/18 to 12/31/18. And this will be the information. So if all this information is entered properly, then our financial statements should be correct. Now, if you look at this information and we compare it to the information that you have, it might be, if there's anything different, it might be a date issue, meaning you might want to then change this date possibly to January 1st, 1/8, and maybe even later to 1/9 here, and see if it picked anything else up. It shouldn't add anything because we haven't entered anything more into the system yet. If there's anything that was added here, if you see any dates other than this date, then you could say, oh, maybe there's a date thing, maybe I should change the date. And how could you do that? You could say, oh, if this one was off, something, the date is different, you can double click on it and you could find that date and you can adjust the date. So that's not something you want to do when we're normally doing bookkeeping, because you don't want to change, you don't want to go back and change things because that could mess up prior trend. But if it's the first time you're setting up the system, then of course all this information should be entered as of that date. So that's one way you can fix it. I'm going to close this back out. So we're back on this information. I'm going to make this back to 12/31/18. 12/31/18. So there's going to be our system. Again, we can go through each of these and check these numbers off to see if they're okay. They may be in a different order. That's okay. So as long as they're all there and have the correct date. Note the other information we have here. Also, inventory items, invoice, bills, deposits. Again, you might say, I don't remember adding any in our process. We didn't add any inventory adjustments or any invoices or any bills. What we did was enter opening balances into the system. All we did was go into the chart of accounts and say, hey, the checking account should be this. This is how much is in the loan account. This is how much people owe us. So QuickBooks is the one that, in order to drive those transactions, made up these types, because these are normally the types that would be made up to record something, say to inventory, or say to sales or accounts receivable would be driven by an invoice, or something to accounts payable, which usually is done with a bill, or something to cash, which is usually done with a deposit if you're increasing cash, or something to a credit card, which is usually done with this credit card form that they use, the type here, credit card charge. Anything that they couldn't find a form for, then QuickBooks defaulted to record that transaction with a journal entry, a general journal. Okay, that debits and credits. So the dates are all here. They're all as of the same date. Numbers are going to be numbered for the journal entries, pre-numbered for journal entries. And then the name is applicable if we had a vendor or a customer. So these are invoices. Anytime we make an invoice, we are dealing with accounts receivable. Anytime we deal with accounts receivable, we need a customer. QuickBooks will not let us do anything to accounts receivable without a customer, so that QuickBooks can make the subsidiary ledger the accounts receivable subsidiary ledger. So these three customers, same with the vendor. That's who we owe. So we had to make a bill that deals with accounts payable. QuickBooks won't allow us to do anything to accounts payable without a bill. because it wants to track who we owe us money to, accounts payable. The memo section is going to give us some detailed information. So this is going to be in the items that we have for the inventory items. Opening balance, it's just basically telling us what other account was hit in the memo here. That's the other information it could give us. QuickBooks automatically generated that memo. It's basically telling us, hey, this was done because you started the company. That's where we put it. And then the opening, and then the account balance here is the information that was given here, basically telling us again that you put this in when we started the company. Also note that I'm adjusting these by going to these three dots. So the cursor looks like this, and I can adjust the size of the columns. Okay, so then we got the account. This is the other account, or the accounts that are going to be affected here. So inventory went to this account, the split account, went to inventory, and it went to opening balance equity. That's what happened. That's the journal entry in essence. When we did something with an invoice, it went to uncategorized income on the income statement and accounts receivable. So that we wanted it to go to accounts receivable, QuickBooks forced to the other side. We wanted it to go to inventory, QuickBooks forced to the other side. And then the checking account, we wanted the checking account, QuickBooks forced to the other side into opening balance equity. Those are the two accounts. Visa, that's our credit card liability. We wanted to put the liability on there. QuickBooks forced the other side go into opening balance equity. Loan, we wanted to put the loan on the books. QuickBooks forced the other side go into opening balance equity. Furniture and equipment, we wanted to put the asset of furniture equipment on the books. QuickBooks forced the other side, just putting it to opening balance equity. And then the equity account here is our adjustment saying, okay, QuickBooks, that's okay that you put it to opening balance equity. Looks good. We're taking it out of opening balance equity now and putting it into the normal equity account, that being owner's equity for a sole proprietor. It would be retained earnings, or retained earnings or common stock for a corporation. Okay, so that's what we got now, and so you want to just basically compare this to yours. If you're looking at it, if you're starting a new company that's different than this, this will give you a good idea of what was done, and it's good to have a record of that and possibly print it out. So we're going to print this out. We're going to put this in with our other forms. We're going to print it in the two ways. We've been printing all our documents. One, we're going to add it to the Excel worksheet that we've been putting together for the startup process. And two, we're going to put it into the a PDF file. So let's go to Excel first. We're going to create a new worksheet, but we're going to put that worksheet into the same workbook. So we're going to put it into an existing workbook. We're going to browse to find that workbook. It's going to be here in our dropdown. We put it on the desktop, Get Great Guitars Reports in Section 6. And there's the report. So we've already got some documents here. We're going to click on this. It's going to open that up. It's going to add the new report to it, hopefully. It's going to do it, I'm confident. And then we're going to say export, and it should do that. So here we have it. We've got the new tab that Excel now calls Sheet 1. So we're going to have, I'm going to pull this over to the left side. I'm going to click on it and pull it over to the left side because it's the last report with all the other reports we've been putting together. I'm going to double click on it and rename it. I'm just going to call it Trans Detail List. You only have a certain amount of information down here, so you want to put the tab, name the tab something appropriate but yet abbreviated in some way. All right, I'm going to click off of it. There's going to be our information. Note again, if you go to the left, it added this little tab over here. So when we give this to someone, we probably want to right click on this and delete that tab. And so then we can have this information going back to our new tab. Also note that if you were to print this now, if I went to File and Print, that it doesn't fit on one page wide now. And so that's a problem because this would look really ugly. So in other words, if I go back, this is where the printing stops. And so you'd have to like tape these two reports together for it to make any sense. That's not good. So we kind of want to adjust this in some way if someone's going to print it and not just view it in the Excel document. Another way you can look at this is go to this view. Over here, this is the page layout view, and it'll give you that page break in a distinct way. If I go back to the normal view, now it's got those split panes. I'm going to go to the View tab, Windows, and get rid of those split panes. So I'm going to do some work to basically try to get this on one side. The typical things you would do is go to the page layout. You go to the page setup orientation. We'll make it landscape. That's the first thing we would try. That pushes it over a little bit, not quite there. The other things you could do is you can go to the file. You can go to print, and we could force it to work by saying that we want the whole thing to print on one page. Letter custom, which will be down here. So scaling. So we could fit it on one page. Now, if you choose this and you have a very long report, you don't want to, if it's long this way and not this way wide, then you want to fit it to all rows in one column. You want to fit the rows to one column. You want to fit all columns on one page, not the whole thing. So you want to pick this one because if it's really long, it's okay to be long and have multiple pages down, but you want to fit the columns on one page. So that's one option you can have. If you choose that, then it'll force it on one page. The problem is that, of course, the text gets a lot smaller that way. So it would be better, if I go back to this, go to no scaling, if you have this problem, to try to adjust the size. And one thing you can do is delete these extra rows. I can go here, say this isn't adding any value, right click and delete. And you could say, I know the date, that's not adding any value. I can delete that row. And so these little middle rows don't really add. I'm going to hold down Control and just take all these little rows out, which aren't adding any value to the report. And just right click and delete. So then it all fits on a page. Those are just a couple things you can do to try to present this. And notice again, you could give someone this Excel file, or you can go to File up top and you could go to Print. And instead of giving them this one page, or whoever, him or her, our client or our boss, supervisor, you can go to the print options and print the entire workbook. And so then you can give the information, if they don't know Excel or don't want Excel, the entire workbook with one PDF file with 5 pages to it, which is a little bit easier probably to look at and scroll through than 5 different PDF documents. So just some options again. Going to close this back out. We're going to save that. Our other option for printing it is, of course, to go to the Print tab here, or go to File, Save as a PDF, and then email it or something like that. We can go to Print Report as well. And here, again, you want to check the preview and say, okay, does this fit on one page? In this case, it does. So it's actually doing it here. If it didn't, then we'd have to close this out, and change the rows, and possibly add or delete rows or columns that are not needed. So our other option is we're going to go ahead and say, okay, that fits on one page. I'm going to go ahead and print the report. I'm going to print it to the Qt PDF printer because that default always works. If you have a Qt PDF printer, it's free to download. And then we're just going to print that out. And then we'll save it. It's going to the correct folder. It's going to save it as a PDF, same folder. I'm going to call it, what did we call it? Transaction detail. And again, if you do it this way, note that then now we have these reports that we would have to give to someone, either with 5 reports in an email, or zipping a file with 5 PDF files in it, or we give them that Excel sheet, which is one file, or we can give someone a printout of the Excel sheet with just one PDF file with these 5 reports in it. So those are a few options for us. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info.